This is the CreaseCast.
CreaseCast, episode 132, part 2, Electric Boogaloo.
Yeah, it's like, do you remember The Lion King 1.5? It's like that. Like, it's just
that was
Timon and Pumbaa.
such a bad, like, you know, when
apparently
you're a kid,
it's okay. I've heard it's okay.
Not. When you're a kid and you recognize that a movie sucks, that's a bad sign. Anyways, complete aside
Worst
here.
Disney sequels. Let's talk about them for a bit.
We're not here to talk about hockey at all. No. This is our follow-up to our emergency episode talking about Ekman Larsen and Jim Benning trying to save his job. We have to cover the expansion draft, which happened on Wednesday. And can we just say, what the fuck was the NHL thinking scheduling an expansion draft, an entry draft, and free agency around a 7-day period? What the hell is that? That is
a lot.
Complete crap, man. You know how hard it is for people like us who have day jobs? Well, not you. You're chilling in Petaluma, just living your best life.
I am unemployed.
Yeah, for us folks that have day jobs and don't do this for a living, it is very hard to keep up with all of the news. Okay.
Yeah, I need to be able to get Cody to come and record at 8 a.m. if I need to. It's not fair that they're doing this.
You know how hard it is for me to leave a guy on red at 8 a.m. every Wednesday morning. I hate doing that to him, but I have to because that's the way work goes. But anyway, folks, this is the expansion draft coverage and all of the fucking crazy ass trade deadline moves that we've been seeing up until today. I think there's maybe a couple ones that have been happening as the draft is going. We're still recording as the first round is taking place.
Which is surprising because, I mean, the last few drafts, if you remember, they were pretty devoid of any interesting trades or anything going on, specifically around the first round. Like, sometimes things would get a little bit cooking, like, in the later stages. Like, the JT Miller trade, I believe, happened right before round 2. 2019 started. I remember being in Rogers Arena when that happened. I think I think the PK Subban trade to New Jersey also happened around that time. I think last year a few weird things happened, like day 2, but usually day 1 is just the picks. We always say, "Oh, who's going to move up? Who's going to do something interesting?" And then nothing ever does. Yeah, this time we've actually gotten some stuff happening. Some stuff has actually been going on.
We've seen 2 first-round picks moved, and there's still 9 picks to go. No, 13 picks to go, and we've already seen 2 first-rounders moved. Usually, like, you'll see on the second day, like, all the weird picks, like, oh, so-and-so's traded pick number 76 for picks 128 and 197 or whatever. They're always, like, really weird, like, picks like that where they're trading up for, like, a specific guy. But today, we're getting all pure chaos. This is the pure chaos episode. So why don't we quickly touch on the expansion draft and whatever the fuck it was that Ronnie France was pulling off? Because whatever it was, it wasn't working, brah.
Yeah, the expansion draft was very interesting not from a draft standpoint per se, because look, we knew what was going to happen hours before any sort of actual picks went through. That is my biggest question is, why did the NHL mandate that, your picks have to be in 8 hours before the thing? You're not allowed to wait. That was a very dumb thing to do. It completely, like, I'm not going to go as far to say, like, it ruined the entire expansion draft, because I don't think that's fair. I don't think that event in reality it's not for any of us in reality.
It's for the fans that are there, really.
Yeah, it's for Kraken fans. Like, this
for
is
the crackheads out there.
Maybe Jordan Eberle's pick leaked hours before. But it wasn't about that. It was about the fact that he was going to walk out on that stage in the Kraken jersey for the first time and introduce himself in front of, like, with that big view of the sound behind them, like in front of all the new fan base. Yeah, they did a great job with the stage and everything else. I suggested they should put, like, those decorations in a fountain outside the arena after.
Their mics needed a bit of work.
Their mics need a bit of work. Like, I saw some people like dunking on ESPN. First of all, that was an NHL production. This and the draft are both NHL productions.
Explains the draft production, that's for sure.
Yeah, people are like, it looks a lot like NHL Network. It's like, that's because it is. This is an NHL Network show that's being broadcast on ESPN. ESPN's not going to officially start producing anything until next season. But I mean, I will say I saw some people making the joke of like, oh, this is at least I'm enjoying the fact that Tony Hawk is on my TV before the expansion draft, much more than the car auctions on NBC. And I'm like, yes, this is a much better upgrade.
Way better.
This is ESPN2 is a huge upgrade from NBCSN, which says a lot more about the NHL than it probably should. But the fact that the picks leaked ahead of time definitely did take a bit of the starch out of the event a little bit. It made it made the intrigue a lot less interesting because everybody had kind of already analyzed everything by that point. We already kind of had come to terms with who was getting chosen. And of course the Canucks lose Cole Lind. Did you think Cole Lind was going to get picked? Did you think that a Holtby trade up until the Saravelli bomb do you think Holtby was probably going to be the one going on a deal?
I thought for sure, based on how much speculation about a Holtby trade to Seattle with retention was going to happen, that when that tweet came from Cap Friendly or whoever it was that said no trades in the pipeline, Seattle made 0 side deals, my jaw dropped. I could not believe it. Cole Lind, he gets taken, whatever. He might be something. The Kraken needs some kind of fourth line, so he might actually just have a shot just by virtue of there being nothing else. Good for him. The Canucks really offered nothing for them to take. It was Madison Bowie or Jonah Gadjevich. In our expansion draft episode, I took Gadjevich purely because he had the waivers, so you didn't have to worry about losing him if after camp he doesn't impress. I guess they took Lind because they really think he could be something for them, and I don't blame him. He always shows up in the sophomore year of a new league where he seems to figure it out and knows how to play. So good for him. But that being said, the draft, the fact that Seattle made no side deals to try and further their position or improve themselves, I thought was very strange. I loved that Frank Saravalli had spoiled the entire event throughout the entire day so that they had nothing to work with. That's some amazing pettiness that he showed to his former employer. That rocks. But yeah, just overall, just seeing so little trades, so little activity, just general picks, and they weren't exciting picks. Jordan Eberle getting picked. Are you jumping out of your seat for that? Yanni Gourde, sure. That's a big. That's the best pickup of the day.
But the problem with that is that for hockey people, that's a big pickup. For normal sports fans who are just getting into a sport, probably not a lot of them know who Yanni Gourde is. There wasn't they had some potential opportunities to take people that maybe more casual sports or hockey people might have known, like Vladimir Tarasenko or Carey Price, if you wanted to go in that direction. Take that risk. James Van Riemsdyk. Yep, that's another one. There's a couple. You're close enough.
That's one.
It's entirely possible, but they did get some good players for sure. Mm-hmm. But there were also just a lot of picks that I think were really just huge questions. Specifically, I think that it's the fact that you could have had, say, Van Riemsdyk or Jakub Voracek, depending on which one you wanted. Yeah. And instead you elected to go with, who is it? They went with
Carson Twarynski, which we'll get into when we get into the trades aspect, because the entire expansion draft process for Seattle kind of felt like wasted opportunity, especially now that we've seen the Coyotes deal and what they were able to get for all of Vancouver's scraps. You kind of just look at Seattle and you go, what was your ask from them? How could you have not been hey, we'll take Beagle, Eriksson, and Roussel off of your hands if we can draft Tanner Pearson? Right. There was so much opportunity for them, that was exposed after the fact with trades from players or teams like the Flyers and Carolina and stuff, that you're just what kind of prices was Ron Francis setting that
no team wanted to deal with them
out? Because as Thomas Strantz put it, like the team had $81.5 million in cap space, and then when they finished the draft, they weren't even the bottom team for amount of cap space available to them. They were 6th. There were other teams. Arizona, I think, was one of them that had more cap space available to them. So instead of having like 29 million cap space, 17 extra picks, and a bunch of extra players to go on with it, they just had an okay roster, a 4th round pick that they picked up by flipping Tyler Pitlick to Calgary, and less cap space than other teams who have since used their cap space to improve their draft position. It's very suspect and questionable. You're a Carolina guy, so is this at all surprising to you to see Ron Francis maybe kind of be a little too safe and maybe, I don't want to say blow this opportunity, but it seems like they blew the opportunity?
Now, we should be very clear here. I only started paying attention to the Hurricanes when the bunch of jerks era started with under their current regime, when they actually started getting interesting. So I don't know a whole lot about what they were doing prior to that. I do believe Morgan Geekie, who they drafted from the Canes, I believe was a Francis pick. I could be wrong on that one. I don't know. I think it's very much a case of a guy either asking for too much from teams or potentially just not asking all much of anything from people, like for what they were getting, like kind of just testing the waters kind of thing, maybe asking what would it take to get this guy, but then not actually doing it kind of thing, if you catch my drift. Because there is a lot of cases here where I'm looking at the guys they took, and based on cap space is very important, but then I look at picks that they made, like say Alex True from the Sharks was a big one for me. Decent hockey player, he's fine, but he's not really NHL. I don't see him as a future NHLer by any stretch. Like, he's an AHL guy. He's AHL depth. That's great, but I don't really know why you pick him when there were arguably better options, even as far as AHL guys are concerned, on the Sharks board potentially, and other players you could have potentially moved as well for the right price as RFAs. I don't know what exactly they were going for here. I don't see any particular, like, maybe you can enlighten me, but I don't see any sort of particular like team building aspect here. Like, I don't see any sort of specific thing they went for here. Like with the Knights, they went for a lot of like as good a team as they could possibly go with for the right now, while also as many assets as they could recoup. This is not really anything. Like, there's not really any cohesion to any of these choices.
Building a team.
It really is just kind of taking something. Like it was almost like they threw a dice, or spun a wheel every time they came to a new team of who they were going to take. Like, that kind of feels like what it was.
Have you ever been in like a fantasy pool with like way too many people, where there's like 10 people making like a draft, like a fantasy draft?
Yes, then you start,
So you're at the 4th round, you're at pick number 200 or whatever it is, and you have no idea who's left or who's going to be good in providing you points. So you're just being like, I'll take this guy. That's kind of what it felt like, especially when you get into the downright weird moves when they're like, we're taking Gavin Bayreuther, we're taking, Joey Decord instead of Evgeny Dadonov. Like,
I think that was a good smart call, but go ahead. But go on.
Total side note, I think Joey Decord is fucking terrible.
What do you mean?
He was awful in the AHL last year, and I mean, sure, he got into the NHL, good for him, and unfortunately, his run was kind of stunted. But
see, he was a smart call in the sense of like he was supposed to be just AHL depth regardless. Like, he's not supposed to be on the team so much as it was we're going to need a goalie to keep in the AHL in case someone gets hurt. That's kind of a good call. I think they needed one of those guys because it wasn't going to be Vitek Vanacek and it wasn't going to be Kaapo Kähkönen, right?
But that's when
they didn't take.
That's when we get into the logic of what was the direction here, because you could have had Capo Kakinen. You flip him for an AHL goaltender, because unlike Joey Decord, there are thousands of goaltenders available to play in the AHL. Most teams have 2 of them at any given time. You could pick those up for free any year. You did not need to waste an expansion slot. You know how valuable Evgeny Dadonov would be if you pick him up and you retain 50% and flip him? That's value. And that's where you're like, where was the desire or intention to pick up value from this team? Because it didn't feel like they were ever, like you said, there was no direction or cohesion with like the picks or the deals. I mean, I'm using air quotes because they didn't make any. They made one after the fact when they flipped Pitlick for a 4th. But even then, is that really the best you could have done out of Arizona? Like, really? You couldn't have talked to Arizona and been like, hey, we've heard you've been trying to flip Oliver Ekman-Larsson for 2 years to the Canucks now. I bet they're trying to offer you some terrible deal where you have to take back Eriksson. Well, we'll take him and the entire contract, but you're going to have to let us take Garland as well or something. You know what I mean? Like, they protected Garland only to give him up.
Yeah.
So like,
there's so many
bizarre moves where you're like, where was the negotiation? Where was the priorities laid? Because at the end of the day, it just feels like they grabbed a bunch of guys and they're banking on them showing up like people do when they make fantasy hockey picks. Granted, they have like one of the most like expensive analytics staffs ever put together to build this kind of team. But at the end of the day, those are still a lot of bets based on very limited information. And maybe it works out, but it's a big ask.
And of course, no matter how much money you spend on an advanced stats like group of like advanced statisticians, if you don't listen to them, it doesn't matter. Like, it's a moot point. You got to listen to them. And I don't know, looking at some of the picks that they made, that those were advanced stats decisions. Like, I don't know a lot of people in the analytics community who would tell you Brandon Tanev is a good choice based on what his contract is valued at. Mm-hmm. I don't know how many of them would tell you that Curtis McDermott from the Kings is a great choice, considering most of what he's known for is as playing an enforcer role rather than, putting a puck in the net. So I don't know which one would tell you to take Carson Soucy over Capo Kakinen, or Mark Giordano over who's 38 and on his last contract ever over Oliver Shillington. So, I don't fully understand the value of some of the picks they made. And I don't know who is in charge of what here. It does kind of seem like a bit of a hodgepodge mess. They frankly could have come out of it a lot better looking than they did. And that seems to be on them at the end of the day. They could have come out with looking like you and I did the draft, the mock draft. They could have theoretically come out with a group that was potentially the second best team in the Pacific if they wanted. Yeah. Instead, they've kind of gone for they've almost gone into middle of the pack, almost Canucks in the sense of let's see what they can do. Let's see if they can make the playoffs kind of thing.
They did the Jim Benning, here's a bunch of projects, hopefully it works out approach, but in bulk. Yeah. So
in bulk. Yeah.
Why don't we, before we move on to some of the crazy trades, because we don't want to hammer this really bizarre expansion draft, why don't we just go over some of the teams and their picks that they made? So in order, I don't know what the fuck order this is. This isn't even the order they were picked in. So whoever put together this list, I think I got this from an ESPN list, but this is terrible. This is poorly done. It's not even alphabetical. Okay. From Colorado, Jonas Donskoy, Chicago, John Quenneville, Columbus, as I said, Gavin Bayreuther, which I joked sounds like a really cool boat.
Yeah, it does.
We're taking the Bayreuther down the channel.
Good to see you aboard the Bayreuther. We're approaching Martinique.
Yeah, exactly. It sounds like that. For Boston, Jeremy Lauzon. On top of that, actually has a pretty good weekend or a good week for Boston, because then they also signed Taylor Hall to a 4-year, $6 million contract. All things considered, not too shabby. It wasn't a 1-year, $8 million deal that he signed in Buffalo. It's a bit of a pay cut, but he gets some term finally.
Yeah.
Maybe Boston will get the first overall pick next year.
The
never know.
The Bruins are in a weird spot where they kind of have to see if their core can still do it. I mean, it kind of feels like they're not exactly there anymore. It all depends on, what they do over the next, over this offseason. If maybe they can replenish in a couple places here and there. Maybe they move Jake DeBrusk to try and bring in some other pieces. Jake DeBrusk is always the guy who gets brought up in trades because he's the seventh
just
forward.
because he's a guy.
He's a guy who's good, but not good enough to be part of the main six, that real core, which is so set in stone in Boston. So it's mean, but it's so they're gonna move. He's the one guy with value that they could move.
Yeah. Anyway, pair of brothers taken from the Montreal Canadiens. They didn't go for Price. They didn't go for Shea Weber and his juicy LTIR contract. They take Cale Fleury, and then from Carolina, they take his brother, from Anaheim, Hayden Fleury.
Because
kind of fun. They doubled up on the Fleuries from the last expansion draft, so that's pretty good for them.
They saw what the Knights did when they got a Fleury, and they're like, well, how about two Fleuries?
Yeah. I can't do with two.
It's which is why it's gonna be extra funny when they somehow co-win the Norris together next year. Yeah.
From the Vancouver Canucks, as I already said, Cole Lind, a pretty whatever pick. Washington, Vitek Vanacek, which is a great deal for them. Pick. Really great deal. A really solid 1B, possible 1A scenario with Chris Drieger from Florida, who they took.
They didn't do as well as they could have in the goalie department, in my opinion, specifically Kakkonen being the clear outlier there. But overall, it is their strongest. It's their strongest group is the goaltending department. They only definitely
took
have
3 though, which is very, as you're saying already, just very bizarre to only take 3 when you had a bunch that you could have held for ransoms across the league, because you can have a ton of AHL goalies and hold them for ransom, but it's another thing to possibly pick up Price, pick up Kakkonen, pick up Drieger, pick up Vanacek, pick up all these guys. You can just have your way with the league if you really wanted to, but they took the safe approach, and that isn't what happened. From Arizona, they took Tyler Pitlick, and then flipped him to Calgary for a 4th-round pick next season. From New Jersey, they took Nathan Bastian. Calgary, Mark Giordano has said. Philly, Carson Twyrinski has stated. From Carolina Hurricanes, they took Morgan Geekie, which came as a surprise to most. I think you and I were in agreement that it was either going to be Geekie or Bean. It's going to be one or the other, no matter what. And then I think they traded Bean immediately after to who was it to?
They traded him to shoot. Who are we? We didn't write it down. Why didn't we write it down?
Really funny. I want to say New York. I want to say New York.
You might be right.
This is actually really funny, guys. On our notes, I have we painstakingly detailed every single trade, and the very last one,
Blue Jackets,
is Carolina, and it's just Carolina trades Jake Bean for a 2021 2nd-round pick. No team listed. So that's how much care we put into the show, folks. After him,
Blue Jackets. It's the Blue Jackets, by the way. So that's a good pickup for the Blue Jackets, especially once we get into the later trades.
Especially if they can get in more minutes, it might work out pretty good. Yeah. From the Islanders, as stated, Jordan Eberle. From Winnipeg Jets, Thomas Strance's brother, Mason Appleton. From the Kings, Curtis McDermott, who is a forward apparently. Oh no, he's a defenseman. Yanni Gord from the Lightning, former Canucks 1st-round draft pick. Jared McCann from the Leafs. The Oilers, they surprisingly went for Adam Larsen and re-signed him to a $4 million contract. Allegedly, Ken Holland had offered the exact same kind of deal to Adam Larsen, but Adam Larsen was like, fuck that shit, tired of playing in this market, which is so funny. And then on top of that, Ken Holland decided, it's a good time to sign Mike Smith to a 2-year backloaded contract. So bizarre. Ken Holland, man, the guy is so funny to listen to because he sounds like he knows what he's doing. And he talks, he'll answer media questions and then go on 10-minute tangents about like what he plans to do and all this, and then he does shit like this.
You know who also
40-year-old goalie.
You know who also did things like that? Grandpa Simpson on The Simpsons would just go on long tangents where it kind of sounds like he knows what he's talking about, but then we'll start talking about tying an onion to his belt.
I was just going to say, Ken Holland definitely tied an onion to his belt at some point in his life.
It wasn't red onions because of the war. The only ones they had were those big yellow ones.
We'll save the Simpsons references for my next podcast. Next on the list, Florida, as I stated, Chris Driedger. Pittsburgh Penguins, they took Brandon Tanev, who reiterated his ghost story in front of all the Kraken fans, and I bet they were just like, what the fuck? This guy's an idiot, which
I thought it was
really funny, but that story
I think the ghost story is funny.
The boy, Calle Yarncroke from Nashville Predators. That is reference to Marshawn Lynch, who was the best part of the show.
That was pretty cool. I still think they should have taken Yakov Trenin, but that for the moment itself, it was worth it.
Calle Yarncroke is arguably the best contract they can flip for assets because he has 1 year left at $2 million and was the leading scorer of Nashville last season. So keep an eye on that, folks. CreaseCast calling it right now. Yarncroke trade deadline deal. After that, New York Rangers, Colin Blackwell from the Red Wings. They didn't take Troy Stecher, which is sad and shocking because all of us just want to see Troy Stecher experience getting drafted. He should have been the hardest worker in the goddamn game. They took Dennis Cholowski, who is allegedly a defenseman. Buffalo Sabres, they took William Borgen, also allegedly a defenseman. From the Senators, Joey Decord, as previously said. San Jose Sharks, they took Alexander Troué, who is AHL depth at best.
Yeah,
and then from Dallas,
totally fine for that. It's just not NHL. Yeah. It's not an NHL pick, in my opinion. There,
agreed. From Dallas, they took the big rig Jamie Oleksiak, who is a very handsome, tall man, and then signed him to a 6-year, $5.275 million contract or something like that. It's insane. And then from Minnesota, lastly, Carson Soucy, not Capo Kekkonen, but Carson Soucy. All in all, very questionable draft. Maybe there's a lot of value in there that we're not seeing. Time will tell. But if you're a Canucks fan, you should feel a little bit better about this, that maybe the Ekman Larsen trade, as bad as it is, isn't as bad as, maybe coming away from an expansion draft with one good line and a bunch of depth. So you're feeling pretty good if you're a Canucks fan looking at this draft. So anyway, why don't we get into some of the batshit insane trades that have dropped in the last 48 hours, starting with
wild.
One of the ones that is so wonderful to see because it couldn't have happened to a worse team. The Columbus Blue Jackets trade Seth Jones, a 2021 first and a 2022 sixth for Adam Boqvist, a 2021 first, a 2021 second, and a 2022 conditional first round pick that is lottery protected to the Chicago Blackhawks. All I can say is fuck Chicago, fuck Stan Bowman, and Jarmo Kekalainen. God bless you, because when you go all in, you go all the fuck in, and when you rebuild, you re-fucking build.
Yeah.
Chicago then decided to double down on their stupidity with their shitty ownership group and their shitty management staff and re-sign Jones to a fucking 8-year, $9.5 million contract that will expire when Seth Jones is 36 years old. He still has 1 year left on his current deal, so this is just awesome.
I believe that makes him that will make him, as of next year, the highest paid. Is it the highest paid defenseman in the league? Or it's up there. It's up there. It's pretty darn close to being one of the most expensive defensemen in the NHL on cap hit alone. It's not great. I did want to you mentioned the organization as a whole. Before the trade happened, before the Seth Jones trade officially happened, the Blackhawks Twitter. I don't know who their social team is, but they tweeted all they tweeted was the eyes emoji, like the sideways eyes emoji, to get people excited.
Was happening,
like something's going down, and Steve Dangle quote tweeted that and said, "Whatever it is, I hope you make the findings public." And correct.
Damn.
That is and just so we're clear, lots of people made similar jokes in relation to that stuff. And good on those people for making those jokes because they deserve it.
I also loved was their social media channel earlier being like, "Why should we not draft you?" And they asked the fans this, and their entire social media team got eviscerated, as they should. The top reply was something to the effect of, "You shouldn't draft me because I'll actually stick up for my teammates and not throw derogatory slurs at them. I will not be silent in the faces of sexual assault. That's why you shouldn't draft me."
Alleged sexual assault. We have to
allegedly. Please don't sue us.
Yes, please don't sue us.
Big L's taken by the team and by their social media department. You fucking love to see it.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on this trade?
Well, they're going to take a lot of. They're going to take a lot of L's on the ice because, I mean, look, Seth Jones is a defenseman. Like he's a defenseman that's okay. Like he's
like
fine.
Oliver Ekman Larsen.
A little bit, probably a little bit better, like just a tiny bit better, because he's specifically because he's a bit younger. Choose a lot of minutes.
They love that.
His underlying stats are not good. He is a defenseman that has come with a lot of question marks in terms of how actually valuable he is to his team's on ice success. But the problem is he's also a 4th overall draft pick, if I remember correctly. So he's got name recognition. The Hawks are buying off of name brand only when there are better products for a lot cheaper. And that's putting aside all of the stuff of some of the stuff off the ice that we know about Seth Jones as well, which in a way kind of makes him a perfect fit for Chicago.
Yes.
He's kind of there. It's a match made in hell, I guess. It's the decision they've decided to make, and it's not going to work out. I don't think it's going to work out for them. They might not even make it through one of this new contract before it immediately goes sour. I don't know what they're expecting here, especially considering the fact that they're nowhere near competing. Like, I don't know what they think they are. Let's say Seth Jones was as good as people thought he was. Like, it still doesn't make sense because they're nowhere near as good as they could be.
Yeah.
Their division is so stacked as far as like the top teams are concerned that they're not going anywhere. They're not getting into the playoffs anytime soon. Why would you make this trade? Why would this make sense in any way? Especially when you're giving up Adam Boquist, a 1st-round pick, so many other things. Like, again, the OEL trade happened today, and yet it was not even alarm, like a 10 bell alarm on today just because of this trade. The Seth Jones thing.
The Ekman Larsen trade was like 2nd in 3 really awful trades, and I would still say the Ekman Larsen trade, just from like a long-term planning thing, puts it 2nd above this one. This trade's dumb, but this trade is a lot worse because of the contract that gets added to it. Like, if he doesn't get signed a $9.5 million deal, you're probably not thinking this is the worst thing in the world. But because it's this massive contract and they, like you said, they're not in a contention window, you're just like, what the fuck do you think is going to happen with this deal? Also, because they just traded Duncan Keith away and they might get out of Brent Seabrook. So it's the same thing with the Canucks where they're wheel spinning and doing the same shit over and over again.
Can't until Jim Benning trades for
absolutely nothing and doing the exact same shit over and over. So it rocks.
I mean, just wait until Jim Benning buys that contract in like 4 years.
Oh, please. Okay, let's move to the next topic.
You're welcome.
We got to channel the good vibes.
I put that in the.
Let's move on to the next trade before things go bad. Your boys, the hurricane season, Carolina traded their near Calder winning. Yeah, the Carolina Panthers. Of course. How could you forget? ESPN. I don't know how I forgot. The Panthers traded Calder nominee. I think he was like 3rd place or something.
He was close to the top.
He was really close.
He was very close. He was one of a few goaltenders who were very close to the top. Nedeljkovic, I think, might have been. Yeah.
But Tom Dundon, the owner of the Carolina Hurricanes, decided that Nedeljkovic's arbitration case was too pricey for him, so they flipped him to Detroit to Steve Yzerman for Jonathan Bernier and a 2021 third-round pick. Nedeljkovic then signed a 2-year, $3 million contract in Detroit.
Now, is that been confirmed, or is that just people saying that?
I mean, he's never going to come out and be like, "I'm too cheap to sign it." But it's like, why would you give up on him?
Has somebody said that, like, as the thing? Like, I heard. So, from what I've heard, I guess the Hurricanes weren't fully sold on Nedeljkovic long term as to what he could be. I don't necessarily agree with that idea. I wouldn't be surprised if that was their thinking. But I don't think that I do think that what we saw from him last year, putting aside the, his struggles in the second round against Tampa, I do think he had a pretty decent future. I don't know why, as the Hurricanes, you would make this trade. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Outside of the fact that, my biggest concern really is the fact that did they give up on him because he's a shorter goaltender? Because he's one of the rare goaltenders that I believe is 6 foot. I think he's 6 foot, which is considered small by NHL standards, or he's 5'11". He might even be 5'11" on skates. So, small goaltenders, short king goalies like myself, we generally don't get that far into in the NHL books, just because people are very worried about taking goaltenders who are undersized and don't cover as much of the net. With this, the Hurricanes don't really have any other goaltenders that I don't think in the pipeline that are coming up. And their goaltending tandem prior to this was Peter Mrazek and James Reimer, both fine goaltenders, but very injury prone and a little bit streaky. So I don't know why they would take the first goaltender they've had since Cam Ward was at his best. The first time they've had a goaltender who could go the distance at a young age, was actually looking upwards long term, could potentially play through a full season, seemed like, didn't have any injury concerns, I don't believe, and immediately flip him. Arguably, they sold low on him. They didn't even sell him for a high price. They kind of just seemed to give him away. And I don't understand the thought process here. The Hurricanes have kind of made a couple decisions in the last little bit that have made me question what they're doing and what their thought process is.
Yeah. That's kind of what's been the last week in general, is just figuring out team directions. That's what's probably the most interesting about following hockey in the offseason, is just trying to get a gauge for what a team believes its current direction is. But yeah, Carolina, a bit weird. Like you said, Cam Ward was their last real goalie, and he hadn't been useful for 9 years by the time they finally got rid of him. They finally get a good young goaltender, and sure, it might be a fluke, but are you really worried about a $3 million contract? That's the least of their worries, personally. But
yeah, they're saying that that wasn't the case. It wasn't something that necessarily about saving money, but I don't.
Right.
Again,
I don't. It's tough to say.
The reason I don't buy that specifically is just because they're not strapped for cap space or anything. They're not in a precarious cap situation particularly. So I don't really. The only thing that would make sense is they just weren't fully sold on his abilities, because they have money, they have the term and the money, and I don't believe that they wouldn't, just if they actually believed in a goaltender, that they wouldn't have paid the price on it regardless, and then just try to move Mrazek or Reimer out after. So my question mark really comes down to, why didn't you feel he was going to develop into that goaltender? Because all signs seem to point to him becoming a pretty decent goalie, and now you're giving him to Detroit, who might be gearing up to get, they're not going to go very far this year, but next, in a couple of years, they're looking decent if the cards keep falling in their favor here.
Yeah, pretty much. The Yzerplan, baby. He kind of seems to have a track for getting things going in the right direction. And a lot of people kind of questioned the Nick Leddy trade and the retention on Richard Panik. Maybe this is a sign that he kind of still knows what he's doing. Remains to be seen. Still a lot of action to go, man. I have a feeling the second round of this draft is going to see like an insane amount of action going. But anyways,
Flat Cap does that.
The Flat Cap does crazy things to the GM or group chat.
Imagine what hockey with a soft cap, like a soft salary cap, where you could just pay a luxury tax would look like. Like imagine the wildness of that. You've seen the NBA and what they do when they have the luxury tax involved. It's nuts. It could be like this all the time.
It could be. That would actually be a lot more fun, but it would make podcasting really hard because it'd be chaos like every day of the week. Speaking of direction and what the fuck are you doing? Philadelphia had the option to get rid of Shayne Gostisbehere to Seattle for, I can't imagine the price was too high because what they gave Arizona was quite a bit. So to get rid of Shayne Gostisbehere, and it's no secret, like Philadelphia has been tired of Gostisbehere basically since they got rid of Dave Haxtell. Mm-hmm. They trade Gostisbehere, a 2022 second round pick, and a 2022 seventh round pick for nothing. A lot of stuff for nothing in return trade.
Why did the Canucks go after Gostisbehere for that price? Like, what could they like?
I know. Well,
like you're telling me I could have had him for nothing? Like I wouldn't have to pay you anything?
I wonder if it's like it has to be a player evaluation thing where they just came down to we don't value Shayne Gostisbehere as much as we value Ekman Larsen. Has to be that only, right? Because if Philly was willing to give up that much just to get rid of him, surely they could have both worked together to be like, oh, well, we're looking to shed Eriksson, Beagle, and whatever. Why don't we take Gostisbehere and you just swap them for Beagle? That's a 1-for-1 trade, and neither of us have to give up a lot. That would have made a lot more sense. But
yeah, or if you're looking to for cap space yourself, you can stash Eriksson in the minors, or you can stash someone else in the minors. Like we have guys that you can take for that, like for that purpose, so that it comes off of your NHL cap space for other players. Like if that's what Philly's, because that's it seems like what Philly, the whole point of this trade was for Philly, because otherwise they would have taken something back. Yeah. But nope, nothing coming.
The crazy thing about this trade is that the Coyotes have somehow come out of nowhere to weaponize their cap space better than Seattle did. And Seattle started with $81.5 million to work with, and the Coyotes started with like 40 or something.
And they started $0 spent.
Yeah, like I don't even know how that's possible that you blow this, but Ron Francis, baby, what the fuck are you doing? Anyway, the crazy thing about this as well is Arizona heads into this year's draft with 3 second-round picks, and then next season they have 5 in the second round.
Again, they really learned their lesson on the whole.
They sure learned their lesson about draft tampering. So on top of this, as if that move wasn't weird enough for Philly, and on top of the earlier trade we discussed in our previous episode about getting rid of Philippe Myers and Nolan Patrick for $6.25 million of Ryan Ellis, they doubled down on expensive defensemen and bad ones at that. They traded Robert Hagg, who's like a nothing, for Rasmus Ristolainen. Oh, wait. I forgot all the other attributes of this trade. They traded Robert Hagg, a 2021 first, a 2023 second for Rasmus Ristolainen. Imagine that. Ristolainen going for a first and a second in today's economy.
You know who deserves a win? You know who's really deserved a win for the longest time? Sabres fans. Sabres fans have deserved a win for the longest time. Today you got one.
They really did.
You really got one. Like they got a first rounder. Like good for them. Good for Buffalo.
I feel good for people like Dwayne in Buffalo, who had that infamous like rant where he was losing it.
We should have him on the show.
We really should. I'm sure he's getting a ton of calls today just because today was a big win for them. Like when your GM is finally not the laughing stock of the league in a variety of trades. Like, that's got to feel really damn good. Yeah. It's really worth noting that this trade comes like 3 weeks after the Sabres hired Pittsburgh Penguins former statistical genius guru and former AGM Sam Ventura. So they hire Ventura. A few weeks later, they're getting rid of a complete anchor and come away with a goddamn coup of picks. This was such a good bargain deal for Buffalo. Kudos to them. I said it in a tweet. If this is what they got for Ristolainen, what the fuck do you think they're going to get for Jack Eichel? Some team is going to pay big time.
Some team's going to pay. They're going to, and well, you hope so anyway. Like you hope hope this isn't the one-off. Yeah. And they end up like way underselling on a great talent like Eichel. I think they can pretty much hold people to the fire. Someone will pay for it. My biggest question is really coming down to like Philadelphia. What are you doing? Like, I believe like you combine this with like a couple of like didn't they give another player away for nothing? Who did they give, or like they gave someone else like besides Gostisbehere was someone else in there?
It was the Patrick and Philippe Myers trade, which might as well have been nothing. I mean, for nothing, because they got back a 30-year-old defenseman making
Ryan Ellis, who's good, just making too much money.
But kind of like the Canucks committing to 7 or 6 years at 7.5, you don't ever want to commit to a 30-year-old defenseman with $6.25 million and 6 years left on his deal. Yeah. That's just asking for trouble.
Yeah, the Flyers today turned basically 5 picks and 2 players into Rasmus Ristolainen. Not good enough. Simply not good enough. That is Ristolainen. Maybe he'll do a slightly better on a team that's not as defensively poor as the Sabres have been over the last decade. But also, I don't see how that's gonna.
How is Alain Vigneault gonna handle this?
Yeah, and more importantly, like in our last show, you remember we talked about the whole thing of being able to insulate Carter Hart as a young goaltender, and why that kind of made sense. Why Ryan Ellis could kind of fit that mold. Ristolainen's not that. Ristolainen is not going to help you make your goaltender's life any easier. So I don't fully understand what I think it's I don't know. The Flyers are such a weird team. I feel like the Flyers and the Canucks have a lot more in common, like in present day, as like teams that do these very weird things and have like very divided fan bases on what kind of things they should be doing. They feel like there's a lot of parallels there. That being said, I don't know. I don't really know what the Flyers are gonna be next year. Yeah. It felt like this feels like, you know what it feels like? The Flyers were a team last year that got in trouble because their goalie went cold and really struggled down the stretch, which is, relying too much on your goaltender. That's not great. You want to try and build around that. Yeah. Again, parallels, right? Parallels. But the problem is they overreacted to that and have gone kind of off the deep end here and made a lot of decisions that I don't think make them any better and help fix that and help like make them more stable in their back end. So I don't really so they would have been better staying the course.
Yeah. Like if Carter Hart was your problem, then invest in a sturdy 1B. Don't invest in a bunch of older defensemen, because like, I mean, I can't speak to the team or like their systems or whatever. Like, I can't imagine that Nolan Patrick and Philippe Myers were the reason that Carter Hart struggled against, you know what I mean? Like, there's no way. And so to double down on older defensemen just because they're veterans seems like a big gamble, but it's very Alain Vigneault to get rid of young kids in favor of established veterans. So I don't know what their direction is going, but it checks out for the coach and Chuck Fletcher, who's not the best.
I believe he's the guy who signed those Parise and Suter contracts that got bought out last week.
Weird.
Yeah. The Flyers are an interesting team that I don't think I watch enough of. Like in terms of like just like they're like something's always going on with them. They're
really fun in the playoffs. Whenever they're in the playoffs, it's usually a shit show. It's like run and gun, always like 7-goal games. They're always really fun that way, but otherwise regular season, no interest.
Yep. Nope. No interest at all.
A friend of mine actually is a diehard Flyers fan, and like we always make fun of her for like why, and that's always really funny.
Gritty's the one reason worth watching the Flyers. In the
This is true.
It's Gritty. If you saw Gritty stuff going on this year during the season, like when he had the whole arena to himself, it was pretty fun.
Gritty does rock. Speaking of trades, where I mean, these are all kind of the same, right? Like you just don't know like what the direction of the team. The Rangers, Rangers, you know why they made this trade. They traded Pavel Buchnevich, who's like a top 6 forward, for Sammy Blais and a 2022 second round pick. This is obviously Chris Drury's reaction to the whole Tom Wilson thing and wanting a team that is tougher, has size and grit and toughness and all that crap. So he goes to a team that won because of perceived size, toughness, and being hard to play against. Bit of an odd trade for St. Louis. I mean, it makes sense for St. Louis. It doesn't make much sense
for either team. Buchnevich is very good. He's a very good forward. I just feel like their window, they're kind of on the opposite side of the window. I guess they get a little younger out of it. Maybe that's kind of the upside here, is that they're getting a little bit of a younger, and because literally the biggest problem with the Blues is just that they're quite an older group. Yeah.
I looked at it like this has to be just like posturing in the event that a Tarasenko move does happen. So then they're kind of covered and they have like this guy they can slot next to Ryan O'Reilly in the event that Tarasenko moves on. That's the only sense I can make of the entire thing. So both teams satisfy like a need for what they want short term, but it also covers both of them long term as well, in case they're looking at playing big boy hockey in the case of Rangers, or in St. Louis's case, if Tarasenko walks. It's the only thing I can make of it.
Yeah, I mean the you mentioned the getting the size, because the Tom Wilson thing definitely messed with them. Like that's remember though, like you remember
got their GM fired, Jeff Gordon, who's sitting on the draft panel.
We're watching him right now. We're literally watching him talk about Carson Lambeau right now. It's that, and like it's definitely has to do with that. It's also the fact that like today it became official that they signed Barclay Goodrow, who I believe they gave up like a 3rd round pick to get.
It was like a 7th. It wasn't that.
It wasn't that high a pick. Okay.
Yeah.
But what is worth noting, they signed him for 6 years with a value of $21.8 million. It is a cap hit of $3.64 million per season. For a guy who's bottom 6 and meant to kind of be the grit and grind guy. Rangers, again, literally, the Tom Wilson situation completely messed with their heads. Like that, this is a completely reactionary thing to that, which is very well in line with the fact that James Dolan has been much more involved in Rangers stuff lately. That is very par for the course if you know anything about the way Madison Square Garden is the company that runs the Rangers and the Knicks is operated by him. Very much in line.
Just all in all, they had that Wilson fight that Panarin gets injured, and like you could just tell that it fundamentally shook what they believe in or what they want their team's direction to be. And like kudos to them. It isn't like a Canuck situation where like even after the Ekman Larsen and Garland trades, like I still have no idea what kind of identity the Canucks have. The Rangers have an identity in mind of what they're going for, right? Sure, they're overpaying for it, and like the players, like what they're getting paid to fill that identity might not make sense, but you understand fundamentally what they're going for.
Right.
And like we can appreciate like the all in, like the Kekalainen, I'm all in on this image. I get it.
Yeah. You and I probably watched how many Rangers games this year between the two of us? Maybe like 3, 4 at most.
Yeah.
But we could immediately tell you why they did this, like without knowing all that much about them.
Because they didn't have an identity prior to this, and because of that fight with Wilson or whatever, they understand we need to set ourselves to be a tough team. We want to be we don't want to take shit from anybody, and we want to beat you all over the ice. And you can think it's stupid, but it's going for something.
Is it a great game plan in the year 2021 to make yourself less able to score and effectively just make yourself larger and a little bit slower? Probably not, but at least you kind of know what's going on.
Yeah, you know what you're going to expect when you play them.
Right.
But yeah, other than that, that about sums up all the trades. There was one during the draft.
Did you know?
Sorry?
There was the Oilers one. There was the Wild moving up from 22 to 20 to get a goaltender from the Oilers, which they got from the Oilers. Which is so funny because out of anyone who needs a goalie right now, it's you.
Why would you let him trade up? Oh, God, Oilers. Ken Holland, man. What a week.
I don't know. He's been great for content. I'll give him that.
Yes. This has been a great week for content, even though it stretches us very thin on trying to cover all our bases, make sure all the stories get covered. But
next week, we're probably going to have to talk about Zach Hyman's big extension when that officially goes through.
And hope he's trade to Boston or whatever it is.
Is that I've heard that one.
I've heard that one a few times.
The one thing I will say that I immediately noticed upon watching seeing Minnesota step up to make their pick, I see Bill Guerin up there with a couple I think his kids or some kids, local kids from the area playing hockey. I don't know for sure because we can't hear while we're recording. But I did see one Judd Brackett standing right nearby. One of the only people in the camera from the actual management team. So I found that quite interesting.
Pretty great. You're not seeing a lot of Canucks, that's for sure. Now that they're out of the first round, we'll see them in the second round, I believe, tomorrow.
Yep. Or at least third round. We'll see them tomorrow for sure. At some point,
you'll see them at some point. Maybe some more trades are coming. I have a feeling there's going to be. These GMs are going to be super busy, man. It's going to be completely insane. Otherwise, if you enjoyed this episode, everybody, please tell your friends, tell your moms, tell your grandmoms, tell them all. We're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Anchor, Google Podcasts, TuneIn, Amazon, Stitcher, Overcast, all that stuff. We're also on YouTube. You can see our beautiful faces in video format. You can see Lachlan in his pimp ass Toon Squad jersey. You can see my dogs. My Mod Girl summer shirt. What?
Yeah.
Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to rate us, like, and subscribe. Give us those 5-star ratings. That helps us out quite a bit. As always, we have our Patreon content, patreon.com/CreaseCast. We have $1 and $5 tiers. Lachlan posted his big expansion your expansion draft coverage just as frickin' Frank Saravalli blew the entire draft, so it just killed everything you worked on. But if you want exclusive content like that, don't forget to check it out. We put a lot of work into that. As always, I am Cody Sievertson. You can catch me on Twitter at Cody Sievertson and my website, comicsharvest.com. Book it now before I change the friggin' address and before the Canucks sue me for the name that's about to come. Lachlan, where can they find you?
You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Lock in the Crease. You can also find me on lockinthecrease.com. Like Cody mentioned, I posted my expansion draft primer that went up right as Cole Lind was taken. And of course, I did not spend a whole lot of time talking about Cole Lind because I was pretty sure they were going to take Opie. So, whoops, that was on me. That's my mulligan. I'll take the mulligan on that one. But I'm sure I will have some content coming out pretty soon in regards to all the other things that have happened in the last 24 hours that we've already talked about a little bit. I'm sure I will have some more stuff coming out pretty soon here.
Hell yeah. Thanks for tuning in, guys. We will catch you guys on Tuesday for the new episode where we talk about all the crazy nonsense that's about to come over the next 48 hours. Thanks, guys. Love ya. Catch you later. XOXO Gossip Girl.
Bye.